Welcome to History with Herodotus, where we embark on a journey through the vast expanse of human experience, guided by the lantern of curiosity and the compass of wonder. Today, we find ourselves at the threshold of a tale that would shake the foundations of a nation, a testament to human ingenuity and fallibility. The Chernobyl disaster of 1986. In the heart of Ukraine, where the Dnieper River flows like a lifeblood through the landscape, stood a monument to Soviet ambition, the Chernobyl nuclear power plant. It was a behemoth of modern technology, designed to harness the raw power of the atom and illuminate the homes of millions. Yet, on that fateful day in April 1986, this marvel of engineering would become the epicenter of an unprecedented catastrophe, one that would etch its name into the annals of history alongside the likes of Pompeii and Hiroshima. To understand the events that led to this calamity, we must first delve into the world of nuclear power and the Soviet Union's quest for energy dominance. The 1970s saw a surge in nuclear development, as the USSR sought to reduce its reliance on fossil fuels and assert its position as a global leader. Chernobyl, with its 4 RBMK reactors, was the crown jewel of this initiative, a testament to Soviet engineering prowess. As we navigate the years preceding the disaster, we find ourselves in the midst of a complex web of politics, science, and human endeavor. The RBMK reactor design, while innovative, had inherent flaws that would later prove catastrophic. Its positive void coefficient of reactivity made it prone to power surges, a fact known but seemingly overlooked by the designers. This oversight, coupled with a culture of secrecy and complacency within the Soviet nuclear establishment, created an environment in which safety concerns were often secondary to production goals. In the early 1980s, the Chernobyl plant was still in its formative years, with Reactor 4 being the newest addition to the complex. The personnel operating these reactors were largely young and ambitious, eager to prove themselves in a highly competitive field. Among them was Anatoly Dyatlov, a seasoned engineer who would later play a pivotal role in the events leading up to the disaster. A safety test aimed at determining how long the turbines would keep spinning and generating electricity in the event of a loss of power to the main cooling pumps was scheduled for Reactor 4. This test, seemingly routine, would become the spark that ignited one of the most devastating industrial disasters in human history. The days leading up to the test were marked by a sense of normalcy at the Chernobyl plant. The staff was preparing for the upcoming May Day celebrations, and the atmosphere was tense but controlled. However, beneath the surface, a series of critical decisions and oversights were being made, decisions that would have far-reaching consequences. The reduction of coolant flow to the reactor, the disabling of key safety systems, and the underestimation of the reactor's power output all contributed to an increasingly volatile situation. The safety test on Reactor 4, intended to determine how long the turbines would keep spinning in the event of a loss of power to the main cooling pumps, was scheduled to commence at 1:00 a.m. Anatoly Dyatlov, the seasoned engineer in charge of the test, had been instructed to reduce the coolant flow to the reactor, a decision that would later prove disastrous. The crew, comprised of young and relatively inexperienced operators, was tasked with executing the test, despite their reservations about the safety of the procedure. At 1:23 a.m., the test began, and the crew initiated the reduction of coolant flow to the reactor. However, as they did so, they unknowingly created a power surge, which caused the reactor's output to increase exponentially. The operators, attempting to compensate for the surge, made a series of critical errors, including the disabling of key safety systems and the removal of control rods. These actions, meant to stabilize the reactor, only served to exacerbate the situation, pushing the reactor further into instability. As the power output continued to rise, the reactor's fuel rods began to overheat, causing a buildup of steam pressure within the reactor vessel. The crew, now aware of the impending disaster, frantically attempted to insert control rods to slow down the reaction, but it was too late. At 1:24 a.m., a massive power surge, estimated to be around 100 times the normal output, caused the reactor to rupture, releasing an enormous amount of radioactive material into the atmosphere. The explosion, which occurred on April 26, 1986, at 1:24 a.m., was so powerful that it blew off the 1,000-ton steel and concrete lid of the reactor, sending debris flying into the air. The blast wave from the explosion shattered windows and damaged buildings within a radius of several kilometers, while the sound of the explosion was heard as far away as Kiev, over 130 kilometers distant. The immediate aftermath of the disaster was one of chaos and confusion, as emergency responders and plant personnel struggled to comprehend the magnitude of the catastrophe. In the hours and days that followed, the true extent of the disaster became increasingly clear. Radioactive fallout, including iodine-131, cesium-137, and strontium-90, began to spread across the surrounding countryside, contaminating large areas of land and water. The nearby city of Pripyat, home to nearly 50,000 people, was evacuated on April 27, 1986, as the Soviet authorities belatedly acknowledged the severity of the situation. As the news of the disaster began to spread, a team of scientists and engineers, led by Valery Legasov, was dispatched to Chernobyl to assess the situation and develop a plan to contain the damage. Legasov, a renowned expert in nuclear safety, would later describe the events leading up to the disaster as a classic example of how not to operate a nuclear power plant. His team's findings would ultimately reveal a shocking litany of human error, design flaws, and systemic failures that had contributed to the catastrophe. The days that followed were marked by a desperate struggle to contain the spread of radioactive material and prevent further explosions at the damaged reactor. Firefighters, many of whom would later succumb to radiation poisoning, battled to extinguish fires in the reactor building, while engineers worked tirelessly to create a makeshift containment structure to encase the ruined reactor. The heroic efforts of these individuals, who risked their lives to mitigate the disaster, would become one of the most enduring and inspiring aspects of the Chernobyl story. As the world watched in horror, the Soviet Union struggled to come to terms with the scale of the disaster and the implications it held for the future of nuclear power. The cleanup efforts, which would eventually involve hundreds of thousands of workers, were only just beginning, and the road to recovery would be long and arduous. The people of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia would bear the brunt of the disaster, suffering from radiation-related illnesses, displacement, and economic hardship for generations to come. The explosion at Chernobyl had released an estimated 50 tons of radioactive material into the atmosphere, including 30 tons of cesium-137, which would remain hazardous for thousands of years. The nearby forests, once a vibrant green, were now eerily silent and still, their trees frozen in time by the intense radiation. The exclusion zone, a 30-kilometer radius around the plant, was established to contain the contaminated area, and it would remain one of the most radioactive places on Earth. In the midst of this devastation, there were moments of courage and resilience that would define the Chernobyl story. Alexander Akimov, the shift supervisor on duty during the disaster, had remained at his post, desperately trying to shut down the reactor as the explosion approached. His bravery, though ultimately futile, would be remembered as a testament to the human spirit in the face of unimaginable danger. As the weeks turned into months, the full extent of the disaster began to emerge, and the world was forced to confront the darker aspects of nuclear power. The Chernobyl disaster had released a toxic cocktail of radioactive isotopes into the environment, contaminating the air, water, and soil across vast areas of Europe. The consequences of this release would be felt for decades to come, as radiation-related illnesses began to manifest in exposed populations. The Soviet Union's initial attempts to downplay the severity of the disaster had only served to exacerbate the crisis as neighboring countries began to detect elevated levels of radiation in their own territories. The international community, shocked and outraged by the scale of the disaster, demanded greater transparency and cooperation from the Soviet authorities. As the summer of 1986 wore on, the Chernobyl disaster continued to dominate headlines around the world. The ruined reactor, now encased in a makeshift sarcophagus, remained a potent symbol of nuclear power's destructive potential. The people of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia, meanwhile, were left to pick up the pieces, their lives forever changed by the catastrophic events of April 26, 1986. As the summer of 1986 wore on, The Chernobyl disaster continued to dominate headlines around the world. The ruined reactor, now encased in a makeshift sarcophagus, remained a potent symbol of nuclear power's destructive potential. In the months that followed, a new containment structure was built around the damaged reactor, designed to last for at least 30 years and prevent further radioactive material from escaping. This massive undertaking, known as the New Safe Confinement, would eventually be completed in 2017 at a cost of over $2 billion. In the aftermath of the disaster, the Soviet Union established a program to decontaminate and resettle the affected areas. However, many residents were forced to leave their homes permanently, and the exclusion zone around the plant remained largely uninhabited. As the years passed, nature began to reclaim the abandoned landscape, with forests and wildlife thriving in the absence of human activity. Today, the exclusion zone has become an unlikely haven for scientists studying the effects of radiation on ecosystems. The Chernobyl disaster also had a profound impact on the nuclear industry, leading to significant improvements in safety procedures and regulations worldwide. As Mikhail Gorbachev, the Soviet leader at the time, later reflected, "The Chernobyl catastrophe was a turning point in our approach to the environment and nuclear safety. The disaster served as a stark reminder of the importance of prioritizing safety and transparency in the pursuit of nuclear energy." In the years that followed, the people of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia continued to feel the effects of the disaster. Many suffered from radiation-related illnesses, including cancer and thyroid disease, while others experienced psychological trauma and displacement. The economic toll was also significant, with estimates suggesting that the disaster cost the Soviet Union over $235 billion. Today, the Chernobyl disaster is remembered as one of the worst environmental catastrophes in history. The site of the ruined reactor has become a somber tourist destination, with visitors from around the world coming to pay their respects and learn about the tragedy. As historian Serhiy Ploki notes, Chernobyl has become a symbol of the devastating consequences of human error, design flaws, and systemic failures. The disaster serves as a powerful reminder of the importance of accountability, transparency, and safety in all aspects of human endeavor. The legacy of this tragic event can be seen in the ongoing debates about nuclear energy, environmental protection, and public health. As we move forward into an uncertain future, it is essential that we learn from the lessons of Chernobyl and prioritize the safety, well-being, and dignity of all individuals. That's all for today's History with Herodotus. Remember to like, share, and subscribe, and until next time, remember that, to understand the present, we must first understand the past.